What's going on, everybody? William Spencer here with another Coffee Table Talks, but I got to start this one a little bit different because I want to thank you guys. Just recently, I have hit over 100 subscribers on YouTube with this little hobby that I'm doing in this little corner of my house, and I cannot be more appreciative for you guys joining me on this journey, because it is a journey of understanding people on a fundamental level, not just their politics, but why they think the way they do about their politics. And today I've got a very interesting guest, Skyler Akins, who is going to talk to us about his thought process with politics. And Skyler, I want you to introduce yourself, man. Go right ahead.
Yeah, good to be with you, William. My name is Skyler Akins. I am 36 years old. I'm from a really small town in northwest Georgia, in the heart of Georgia 14, called Rockmart, Georgia. Graduated in 2005 with honors. I attended the university and graduated from the University of West Georgia with my bachelor's in political science. I left there shortly to work in Congress for a couple of years, both in D.C. and in the district. I got a chance to travel the world, figure out how the federal bureaucracy works. Came back to Georgia, worked at the state capitol doing 2 legislative sessions as a whip clerk, doing just whip reports, that kind of thing. And then that paralleled into a career with a regional planning commission. Did that for a year. I spent 10 years working for our capital city in the city auditor's office as a senior auditor. Left there, and now I work for one of the big accounting firms doing compliance audits, and I'm a compliance manager there. And so, yeah, that's kind of a short intro of who I am. When I was at West Georgia, ironically enough, I was president of the College Democrats. I was not a conservative until 2018, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I spent most of my college career, and up, like I said, until about 2018 as a Democrat, kind of on that thought plantation is what I like to call it. And now here I am, several years later, in several different roles later, as a Republican activist in some ways. You know, I consider myself one. I believe that Georgia is best when conservatives and Republicans lead it at the local level, the state level, the federal level. And, you know, I just think that, you know, if we don't do more to keep our state red, we will unfortunately see the day when we have a Democrat governor. So I do believe that it is important. You know, 2018 showed us how close Stacey Abrams came to winning. You know, thank God we rebuked her with the re-election overwhelmingly of Governor Kemp. But we, you know, as these folks move here from California, New Jersey, et cetera, we've got to do all we can do to keep our state red and conservative. And so I consider myself a foot soldier in that movement. So that's just kind of a brief introduction of who I am.
Skyler, I love it when I meet somebody who later transitioned and found their conservatism, right? It's such a fascinating story to flow into, because you start to understand something that the right needs to, I guess you could say, observe, is how the left effectively gravitates towards, you know, the younger demographic, and really how effectively they go about that process. You know, but that being said, you don't just all of a sudden turn to the right. Things are foundationally laid, if you will, earlier in age. I wonder, have you ever thought to go back, you know, earlier when you were like a young kid, you know, when your mom or your dad or whatever your family situation was, that there might have been an establishment of conservative foundation? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents were elated when I switched parties back in 2018. I grew up in a Christian household. I grew up around guns. I joke with people, I think I could shoot a gun before I could drink out of a bottle. You know, a baby bottle. It's a joke, of course, but I always grew up with guns, living in the middle of the country. I was always raised in church. My parents are still married over 40 years, you know, so I came from a nuclear family that's still together to this day. And my parents, you know, raised me to be a good Christian American and to love this country, to be grateful for all that it's given me. And so, my parents were actually most of my family, minus a few, were extremely excited when I switched parties and when I finally came out and said, I no longer subscribe to the leftist ideology. And it was kind of a slower process than some people. I kind of wish that I'd saw the light a little earlier, but man, now that I've saw the light, it's glaring in my face. And I think that it also does a couple of things. It makes me a stronger spokesperson and kind of advocate for our cause. And number two, it helps me kind of translate and kind of educate our side on the tactics and the kind of brainwashing that they do to us, both in college and in high school and in media, because they do that in so many different ways. I can't count how many classes I paid for in college that I really didn't need, that didn't help me with my career in government or finance, that I just paid for because they were a part of the liberal academia that you have to have in order to graduate, right? Like, you don't need a human sexuality class to graduate. That does nothing to teach me more about government diplomacy or economics or anything. And we had a million of those classes, even when I was in school in 2005, or college from 2005 to 2009. So yeah, I think that that is kind of the ironic thing, is that I spent so much time in the Democratic Party. I was even active in the Young Democrats for a while on campus. And one of my friends that was the college Republicans chair, we're still friends to this day and have really good conversations about like why I switched. He's now a Democrat, which is another funny kind of thing, interesting kind of story for another day. And a lot of people here in Georgia know him. He lives in New York, so at least he's not voting here.
I love it, dude. If you want to fix your mic, by the way, if you want to push it out a little bit more, totally. No, you're fine. You're fine. I want you to be comfortable, right? I want this to be a very comfortable experience, Skyler. The concept that I want to particularly wrap around right now, okay, is obviously the left got to you, right? When you were younger, whatever it is. What messaging did they use that just for some reason latched you in and said, I am going to teetotal myself and work myself into the Democratic Party? What was that message?
Yeah, it was a lot of things. It was, I never going to get into, sexuality, for example, or identity. They do their best at targeting people like women, people of color, people that are lesbian, gay, bisexual, etc., making them believe that their identity is greater than their country or their patriotism. And I've for so long, until I finally woke up and walked away in 2018, thought of myself more as an identity group than I did as a Georgian or American or a Christian or all these other things that mean so much more to me. And it wasn't really until I realized that this country has been so good to me. I make great money. I have a great job. I have my own home. Why in the heck am I still on, this side, the side that wants to take more money from me, tax me more, the side that wants to divide me, that wants to teach me that people that don't look like me are, somehow my enemy, or people, that believe in groupthink. That was something that COVID really exposes, that they don't tolerate any ideological kind of difference. It's either you toe the party line 100% or you don't. I mean, we were just talking about Misha Maynard, the representative that was a Democrat in a district that went for Joe Biden 90%, switched parties over school choice because she realized what I did back in 2018. It's like, if you don't toe the party line 100% of the time, you're dead to them. And just like Mao did in China, the first people that go are the foot soldiers. They shoot them in the head. Those are the first people that go, and I chose, when I did switch parties and like back to your original question, it was always knowing that I'm an individual with boundless opportunity that people have fought and given and died to give me. Why am I pledging allegiance not to the flag but to a party that tells me every day how stupid, dumb, and oppressed we all are.
You're touching base on such a interesting conversation, right? You know, we don't necessarily have to go down this conversation. It's a very philosophical concept of emphasizing the individual versus the national, right? And the left, I think, does that extremely good. They know how to hone in on what makes you think that you are an individual, and in that individual, that thought press, what your thought idea, if you will, identifies with the Democratic Party only. Only you can stay here. You don't belong to any other group. You are this ideology. You are this this demographic. You belong here. And I've heard that. Yeah, to us, exactly. And I've heard that time and time and time again.
Points based on what identity you are, right? Like I call it the oppression Olympics. You know, you're higher on their hierarchy if you're a Muslim. You're higher on their hierarchy if you're a person, you know, a person of color, or you're higher up if you are trans. Trans is the top right now, you know, and it changes given their priorities. But as we saw with the affirmative action decision, that hierarchy goes out the window when their political whims shift.
Well, Skyler, you were a priority for the left for some time. Can you please talk to me about why it is that you were a priority?
Yeah, so I came out as gay when I was in high school. My earliest memory was in being a junior and coming out. And like a lot of people love to say, and I'm just a normal gay white dude. I know that, like, you know, that's kind of out right now, but that's just who I am. And at the time, that was valued on the left. You got, you know, they had a place at the table because they were an oppressed group of people. But as time went on and we had things happen like marriage equality, you know, like, you know, the courts ruled in Obergefell that two people who, you know, are in a relationship can get married. And then just a year ago with the passage, well, just a little bit less than a year ago, the federal passage of the Respect for Marriage Act. Now it's not only in federal law, but it's in, you know, Supreme Court law in 2015 that I can get married and I have the same rights as you and your lovely girlfriend, you know, that we can get, you know, I have the same exact chance in this country that you did and really always did. Some states called it civil union, some called it marriage. I really didn't care as long as I had the same equal rights. So yeah, that's where it started. I belonged to them, and I really towed that kind of sense of belonging of, well, they were the party that primarily lobbied for my right to get married, so I'm gonna pledge allegiance and tow their water. And it took really a couple of things, and I can go into, that made me realize I don't owe them anything. And as a matter of fact, they are contributing to the rolling back of social acceptance of the LGBT community because of some of the things that they're doing and pushing, like pushing men and women's sports and bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, about 2018, 2017, just started thinking, you know, if it hadn't been for Antonin Scalia, who was a Republican appointee to the court, and, you know, several pro-gay Republicans at the time, Susan Collins, Olympia Snowe, those types, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't have marriage equality in this country. So, you know, I started looking into groups like the Log Cabin Republicans. And I had this friend who I'm going to name. His name is Jamie Inslee. He's the founder of the Log Cabin Republicans here in Georgia. And I always defended him, even when I was a Democrat, because I always would say, you know, if he is there to advance marriage equality or equality for people, then it shouldn't matter what party you're in. If your true goal is equality for a marginalized group of people, and that being LGBT people, then it should be, you know, looked at as, okay, we want this in the Democrat, Republican, and everybody in between. We want that to be the message that we're all equal. He chaired the National Log Cabin Republicans for a year, and he kind of helped me move over to the Republican Party. My first meeting before I attended a Young Republicans meeting was a Log Cabin meeting, which is the official, I don't know that it's official, but we're getting there. We are an affiliate organization of the Republican Party. President Trump, Ronna McDaniel, you know, recognize us, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a national chapter in most, I think, 50 states and territories as well. And it's really good to be with them and to be with people who understand and kind of all of them have the commonality of at some point they walked away from the left. You know, they all had something that caused them to walk away. I had a primary there was a primary in 2018. I don't know if you remember this because I know, I know you love Georgia politics, so this is kind of fascinating. The Democrats, before Stacey Abrams was the nominee for the Democrats, they had a nominee, Stacey Evans, and they were, I think, spelled the same even. She was a white Democrat from Northwest Georgia, and she grew up in absolute poverty. And she put out this video, and it was called, I think, 20 Homes. And this is in 2018. This is when I decided I'm now a Republican. So it was Stacey Abrams and Stacey Evans in a primary. We all know everything that needs to be said about Stacey Abrams. And we had Stacey Evans. Stacey Evans, and this will all make sense while I'm telling this story in a second. Peach pundit a bunch of other blogs, which is now back, but at the time said, if a Democrat can beat a Republican in 2018, it's Stacey Evans. But at the Netroots Nation conference in Atlanta, Stacey Evans got booed off stage, called racial slurs, because as you know, 80% of the Democratic primary, though, is predominantly black people, black Georgians. And so it's only about 20% non-black. So from the get-go, she had a demographics problem. But she was hands still to this day, 100 times better of a candidate than Stacey Abrams. And she really had this video on YouTube that I watched to this day. It's still on YouTube if you Google Stacey Evans homes, where she goes to every home she lived in Appalachia, Northwest Georgia, where I'm from, where her mother had to move because her father was beating her mother. And that versus, the people in the Republican Party, which were all white men, nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that's the facts of the race at the time, versus a woman who climbed her way out of poverty to now being a millionaire. Everybody was shaking in their boots that, hey, she could win the primary and possibly beat any of our candidates. At the time, Casey Cagle was leading the polls. We all know Brian Kemp won the primary. So when the primary happened and I saw how bad Stacey Evans lost, I looked around and I said, okay, the Republicans are kind of over, not really discussing the gay issue. They don't really care. I never have really, even in high school and in college, was never made fun of for being gay. I know some people do and they experience that, but I never really had that issue. I was pretty accepted and hung out with the guys and had a pretty normal childhood. Nothing in my past would say to you that I would be a gay man. It was just, my earliest memories that I have, I remember that, and that will bring me later to tell you why I think the trans issue is different. But long story short, 2018, I went in that booth. I pulled the lever, straight Republican from Kemp down, and I have not voted otherwise since. I mean, I love our governor. I think he's doing a great job. There are things I disagree with him on. Of course, they love to paint us like we all are monoliths and we agree with all of our Republicans 100% of the time, but we all know that we're going to have disagreements. But that's when and then I went to a Atlanta Young Republicans meeting in 2019. I was appointed to the board in 2020 and then elected treasurer in 2021, 2022, and I'm finishing out my term now. And then last year I served as vice president of the Georgia Log Cabin Republicans. We only represent LGB, lesbian, gay, bisexual Americans, and I'm treasurer, of course, elected of the Atlanta Young Republicans, which is actually the second largest YR chapter in the country. The only chapter bigger than Atlanta Young Republicans is New York City, and of course we know you can fit 26 states in New York City, so we feel pretty good about our numbers.
Dude, I love the competitive nature of conservatives. Skyler, I want to ask you a really personal question. The the nature of this podcast is to learn. There's a lot of things that I don't know. I like to live by the philosophy of the only thing that I do know is that I know nothing at all, right? Which is a famous thing. But to boot, I like to assume that my viewers don't understand things as well. They might, but they might not, right? Somebody might be watching this video and have this question, and I want to present this question to you. So when you came out, you didn't just come out, it was like, I'm gay, but you also on the political spectrum as well. So not only on the cultural spectrum, you're kind of going against the status quo, I assume, of what your nuclear family was, but politically speaking, you're going against the status quo of probably what your nuclear family was. Yeah. I want to know how that experience was. Was it tumultuous? Did you have to go through some times to fix things, to talk things through? What was that like?
So on coming out as a gay person or as a Republican?
Both.
Okay, I've told this, and I'm so glad you asked this. When I posted in 2019, the very first kind of base red-pilled post I made, I belonged to the ACLU for years, and they made a post that said men can get pregnant too. I reposted it to my Facebook profile, and it got 400 comments, lectures from affluent liberals telling me that yes, men can get pregnant, and they love to talk about, intersex people, which are 0.0001%. It's so statistically irrelevant and small that, it basically is very rare in science. But back to your original question, because I want to answer your question because it's such a good one. I experienced very little discrimination. Like I told you, I had a normal childhood. I still have a nuclear family that's married. My parents love each other. My parents are textbook examples of a great marriage and a family. It was 100 times harder to come out as a Republican and gay as it was to come out as gay. I did a post about right around COVID, when COVID came out, and it was something, basically pointing out, there was a story at the time about the Catholic Church, and like how the government, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the church was making the argument, well, if you're going to open casinos, why can you not open Catholic churches? And I took the Catholic Church side. Long story short, I knew then that, again, it was going to be harder to be gay and defend Christianity than it was to ever be just a gay person when we were, discriminated against. Because you have to keep in mind, in the early 90s, Matthew Shepard, this wasn't that long ago, you have to keep in mind that gay rights and gay suffering and oppression is a real thing. I mean, Matthew Laramie was at a bar using the bathroom, pulled out of the bar by two men who tied him to the back of a truck, drug him miles down the road while he was still alive, tied him to a fence post, left him for 3 days to die and rot. So it's like the discrimination is real, and I'm not saying that because I had a good experience that everyone does, because they don't. People lose their homes. I was on a nonprofit board for 2 years that took in LGBT kids that were kicked out. Not kids, they were over 18, so youth, let's say, that were kicked out of their house because they were LGBT, and they all had this common element of, well, my family's very religious, and I would always tell them, that can't be true, because if your parents were religious, they would love you for who you are. They would show you the face of Jesus. And ironically enough, William, the places that we would send the kids from the night, it was called Lost and Found. The places that were most willing to accept trans kids, which is very sensitive, right? Because you got to determine, are these better sleeping with other homeless males or females, and what parts do that? It's a very complicated thing. The people that were the most helpful were the churches, but you never hear that in the media. You only ever hear about, the churches discriminating and harming the LGBT community. It's not true. I will tell you again, I will go to a bar, I'll go to a restaurant or anything, and people berate me for being Republican. We had The Log Cabin for the past 2 years has had a booth at the Atlanta Pride Parade, and we do that because we want to show the LGBT community, more of the LGB, because the T, they're not really coming to our side, and there's a whole nother reason we can get into if you want to later. But for LGB people, there was either two classes of people. They were either so angry, cussing, we even had a guy that threw something at us. Thank God they put us next to Georgia Carey, so they were a little afraid to be too aggressive with us. And there was another group of people that were like, we're really glad you're here. And I would always tell them, our platform still says marriage is one man and one woman, and I'm aware of that. But we can come to a compromise as a community, community as a party, where we can say it's okay for two people to get married, but we've got work to do on our platform. So just in the same way that I believe that two people who love each other should get married, I equally believe, and you're right, or anybody's right, to say marriage is one man, one woman. And I also take that a step further. I don't believe churches should be forced to marry people, and I don't think that cake bakers should be forced to bake cakes, because here's my theory: the free market is going to take care of a cake baker that won't bake cake for gay people way faster than a state like Colorado will, because it'll get out on Yelp. They're homophobic, they don't do gay cakes. That's going to hurt them way more than the state of Colorado can. So that's my perspective on it. I'll tell you, I lost in 2019, 2020. I kept a running tally of per month how many friends I shed. Probably close to 1,000 people left my social media accounts. And I don't really post a lot on my accounts because I work in corporate America and I love being employed, so I have to kind of self-censor myself to some degree. But I lost a lot of friends by posting simple things like men can't have babies, and there's a difference between male and female, and there's only two genders, there's only two sexes with the exception of intersex. And this pronoun thing is crazy, because when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a mermaid. I can remember being in the bathtub as a little boy and my mom saying you can't be a mermaid. Same thing with trans. Like we've got to stop entertaining people's delusions.
You bring up a good point. I want to talk about two things in particular, because we've kind of emphasized the Christianity aspect, right? I want to hone in on that, but I want to come across to you and give you a concept that I've been thinking about for a while. Back in the day, millennial, right? Kind of millennial.
Yeah, I'm a millennial.
Same thing, right? So
an older one, but I'm a millennial.
Yeah, right. It was accepting of the gay community was very much emphasized in our youth, right? It was, just accept them for who they are. Yeah. And rhetorically speaking, even on the Christian standard, you're talking about what was typically said, and typically the reverberation from the gay community is like, hey, listen, we respect marriage. We do believe that it needs to be this, but we just want to have some kind of unionship, which was, in my opinion, as a younger kid, extremely, extremely fair, right? But then things started getting added on, and I started realizing how the left worked. And in my opinion, the left works on social activism. So now here's the thing, is they have to fixate on an oppressed party. Whatever oppressed party that is, they're able to fixate on it, and they're able to create the victimhood mentality. Now, the thing was, increasingly, is the gay individual was moving up in society and moving up in terms of social standard. Well, they're not really oppressed anymore.
We're not oppressed.
Exactly.
Since the day we could get married, we're not oppressed.
They're a lot more accepted. So, now we have a problem with the left, or rather the left has a problem because they're running out of the activist class. So what do we do now? Right now we have the LGBTQ
IA++.
Nah.
Divided by.
The plus is the thing. No, that is the scary thing. The plus is the scariest thing, because do you know what the plus is?
I know that it is an attempt to add every type of sexual deviance and debauchery possible to the end of it.
Skyler, the plus is ambiguity. When you create ambiguity, right, in terms of, think activist class, right? I can now create my own new activist class. We can just keep building Oh, you want to be a squirrel? Okay, great. You're our new activist class. We're going to work for the squirrels. The squirrels are going to have their own bathroom in the schools, and all that fun stuff. I'm sure you've heard about the cat thing over in Texas.
I've heard that it's in Jasper, Georgia, apparently.
Oh my gosh, man!
We need to call the National Guard in on those folks.
Dude, seriously, so that's a thought process I've been going through recently, and I would invite you to kind of start thinking about that. It's kind of the slippery slope concept, but in terms of political activism. Now, there is a story here, okay, because we were starting to lean into Christianity, and this is something that I particularly want to bring up because it's going to transition us into the trans topic.
Okay, because I have something to say about LGB and the T and the rest of it. So
the Christian aspect of it. Now, this is my first time coming out publicly about this story. I was actually really apprehensive about doing it because I didn't really want to seemingly give credit to myself, right? I like to give credit to God to this moment because it really was. I was having an issue with a teacher at KSU, go figure. And just philosophically speaking, man, I was just having an issue. I was constantly getting battered in every single class of my conservative values. And this one class in particular was philosophically just saying, like, you suck if you're conservative. Day in, day out. It was horrible. So I was like, I was walking out the door. I was praying to God. I was like, listen, just give me the words I need to speak. I don't want to be a horrible person to this other person. I just want them to understand where I'm coming from. Just give me the words that I need to speak to them, right? And I get to school, and I go over to the green, and there's these dudes out on the green with these great big signs, and they're like holding them down on top of this huge group of people, and the signs say, okay, if you're gay, bi, trans, lesbian, you're all going to hell, you need to repent, you need to do all this fun stuff. And equally, on the other side, you had like the blue hair, the purple hair, the really weird dressed,
the membership card for Antifa.
Yes, you had those people out there, against them, right? And they were doing their thing. Well, here's the thing that I noticed, Skyler, is I don't go to the folks with the signs. I don't care about them. They're so biblically minded that they're just not going to listen to any kind of reason, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just the way that they apply it. I'm not going to get into that. But I went to the kids, and I was like, hey, listen, I want to know what you think about this. How does that make you feel? Now, you or I, if we just met, right, you're not going to tell me your world's most horrible trauma. You're just not. We humans aren't like that. We need to know an individual on a fundamental level to be able to open up and share that. These kids were so rocked to their core that they immediately came out with their traumas. It's like I was raped, or the church did this to me, or this or that or that or this. And these were all these trans types of individuals, these LGBTQ, et cetera, et cetera. So I went inside KSU. I got a sign, and I basically just wrote, come and talk with me about God. Period, right? And these kids came over, and their first reaction was antagonistic, naturally, right? They were very flustered. They were very, I cannot believe you're doing this. I'm like, whoa, I'm not with them. Let's just have a talk, right? Once they realized that I was there to just have a discussion with them, they genuinely wanted some kind of truth. And they were like, I need to come to terms with the fact that I want to be Christian, but I can't be Christian because of my lifestyle or the way that I'm living my life. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult to walk those lines because, as a Christian, I hold myself to that standard that, that God gives us the standard that we need to live up to. We need to follow that standard. And part of that standard in the Bible, of course, is saying like, okay, we can't lay with other men, et cetera, et cetera. But here I am presented with an individual who is lesbian, gay, trans, whatever, who is in conflict, deep, significant conflict about who they are as an individual and their want to understand Christianity and accept Christianity, right? And that's the thing. On both the Christian side and the political side, we are entering a new era of dealing with something that we've never really dealt with before. This is such a fundamental difference in the fabric of our nation that we're having to learn as we go on. And this is why I was so excited about having you on, Skyler. because you can provide perspective. Now, I can give you how I handled that situation. Perhaps I'll do like a little podcast on it, later on, because it was beautiful. I really did. I touched those kids' hearts in such a way where a couple of them just broke down, cried, and went on their way and pursued things. I'm almost kind of tearing up thinking about it. Yeah, but
it's a beautiful story.
It is. And given that we're entering this new era, Skyler, you guys, the Log Cabin Republicans, have the best ability to reach across in such a way, especially if you do uphold, exemplify Christian values at the very basis, because that's what these kids need. They just need the in. And then in that, you're able to kind of sustain with that kind of like, hey, also, I'm conservative too. I want to talk to you a little bit about how it is that ought to go about, in that conflict of Christianity and explaining that to this new culture that is the trans culture.
No, I love it. There's a couple of things that go along with my answer, and this is a very deep question. I think there's a couple of things that need to happen. I think the first thing that needs to happen is there needs to be an apology. Because when you read from everything from what happened, one of my best friends, Ruth Malhotra, you may know her. She's a famous free speech activist. The church needs to apologize. The Catholic Church, from their cover up of all the Sodom and the rape and everything that occurred there, to the Baptist Church, Southern Baptist Convention covering up all their sexual allegations, to Hillsong, which is one of my favorite artists for Christian music, and all the scandal that they're involved in, all the way down to every religion that we know of that's organized has went through it. And the Bible says these things will happen. What is good will become evil. I think an apology has to be done. And I'm not saying apologize for our values, but there's been a lot of people hurt by the church. And instead of people should be, when I've been in times of great moral conflict, I run to church. That's where I find my answers. That's where I find my healing. I'm also a musician. I play piano. So those are the places I go to find healing. So I think that has to happen first. I think there has to be some reconciliation, and there has to be dropping of these labels of, oh, I'm, Church of God, or I'm this Baptist, and just say, as a faith, we have failed because we have empty churches, empty pews. The church membership is growing, literally declining by the week. Literally, less and less people are going, especially in our age group. I think that has to happen. The second thing that needs to happen is you don't get people, like there's the saying, you win people in with honey and not vinegar, right? And I think that if you tell people and show people the face of God and the mercy, forgiveness, and grace that God gives us, that you're going to pull people in. And going outside a place and holding up hateful signs like God hates fags, like Westboro Church used to do, that's not going to get anybody in the church, and it's not going to get anybody in there. And if your goal is to just get people in, then you do that by loving them and showing them kindness, grace, and mercy. And we know a lot of people between the two of us that are doing that. And I'll also say that the way that I personally reconcile it is that, and I told you a little bit of this, what happens to me and what I do in my private life, that's between me and God, and how I rectify that is between me and God. And only God determines whether I go to heaven or not. And, and St. Peter's the guardian of heaven, and so I'm comfortable with the way I live my life. And I try not to lead with, oh, I'm Skyler and I'm gay. As I was telling you, it's very low in the totem pole. I'm only here talking about it because I want to get the message out that we're not a monolith, and that there are those of us that are not in that monolith. And you ask about the trans particularly, and how do we deal with that, and go on with that. What's so funny is that what's lost in the conversation is that Christians are the most tolerant people when it comes to transgenderism and homosexuality, because as you probably know from your service, most of, of Africa and the Middle East, except for Israel, you are executed for being homosexual. Women can't drive or own property or have bank accounts in most of these countries. So we look at it from a very privileged way. And again, that's why I'm a Republican. I'm proud to live in a country where I can be, love, and do what I want to do as long as I'm not harming others. And back to your original point, I think that, you don't apologize for being Christian. That's not what I'm saying. I think there does have to be a national conversation within the Christian church about the wrongs that we've done and how we rectify that, because I think more and more people that I know are dropping out of church and falling away because they've been hurt. And whether that be by a group or a denomination, the fact that the Boston Globe had to break the story that, thousands of children had been harmed by the church is just shameful. The fact that the church didn't come out, say that, apologize, the Pope put out for, years even acknowledging that it existed is a problem. And, back to your question about log cabin, we have the audience. We are in the best place to bring people in from a Christian perspective, but more so from a perspective of politics, where they're going to be surrounded by people that are Christians, and they're going to be surrounded by people who love him and accept them, and they're going to lead them toward better and more righteous things. That's happened for me. I cannot tell you how much better my life got when I started coming to Republican events, because we're more about individualism, taking your destiny, making your own life, doing your own, building your own future, your own destiny. The Democrats are groupthink. So, I tell people all the time, it wasn't until I joined the Republican Party that I realized that I, have such a great network of people that go to these events. You meet people like you that were in the military, CEOs, real estate agents, people that are doing great things with your life. We're bringing them into the party, and then they're going to meet someone that's going to show them that faith, or show them the face of God, and show them, that they don't have to believe in groupthink Marxist identity-based politics, and I think the two kind of go hand in hand. I think that, we've served two purposes. We're bringing them in the party, getting them to vote our way, but we're also bringing the community together in a group where people that want to come in and join and just kind of fill it out, and maybe invite them to their church or invite them to their events. We actually have a group, and we meet regularly where that can occur. And I know quite a few people, just from my personal experience, that they credit what we do with, helping them grow their network and get out of a dark place that they were in their life. Because like I told you earlier, a lot of people get disowned by their families. And the trans thing, the reason that I try to say this is that, they are obsessed with gender. The other LGB are sex, same-sex attraction. I didn't choose to be gay. Trans people, on the other hand, they are saying, for example, I feel like I was born in the wrong body. Well, I felt like I was a mermaid when I was a child, number one. And then number two, there's not enough of the conversation of going on right now outside of a few that tell those children and the people that are going through that what happens when you regret it, the detransitioners, and what happens, when, what would I think this all the time, William? I think if I was in school in today's, if I went to Marietta High School and I was Skyler, in school today, would they say, this is Skyler, he's just a pretty kind of a little feminine guy, he's just, and left me alone? Or would they say, Skyler, you've got a little bit of feminine characteristics, we need to transition you? I think about that all the time, and I think it's the parents, it's the teachers, it's everything happening, and it's happening in places like at Kennesaw, where they're being radicalized, sent to the schools, and they're hiding things from their parents, and that's happening at an alarming rate. And I think the reason that I'm so outspoken that the T should be separate is because I feel like keeping them as a part of the LGB is rolling back years and decades of social progress that our community has made toward having equal rights and equal treatment. Not special treatment, special rights, equal. Trans people want special rights.
Skyler, one of the things that I just thought about when you were talking, two things in particular. One thing is I remember back in the day, when we were, going through the discussion of like, should we be accepting or more accepting of gay people in society, right? The biggest argument typically made against the right is the right would say that their lifestyle is a choice. They're choosing this, right? And the left-leaning folks were saying, oh, no, it's not their choice. It's who they are. It's who they were born to be. That being said, now let's flip the switch in terms of like, how you pointed out, like the LGB, right, is separate from the T. It's almost flipped, right?
Yeah.
The left is now saying, no, it's their choice. They get to choose who they want to be, right? Yes. And we're over here like saying, no, they really don't.
Years telling us that you don't get to choose. Yeah.
Exactly it, man, exactly it. And you hit another good point when you said the statement that this is between me and God. Let's flip that. Let's flip that on the worldly view. Let's say this isn't necessarily between you and God. This is between me and my household. Well, now it's no longer just the household domain. Now it's in the schools. You pointed that out, right? It's educating, or rather indoctrinating, let's say that, to these kids in schools. Yeah. And that's totally different than how things used to be. Yeah. It wasn't like I'm going to teach you to be gay because I feel like, you're gay. As a teacher, I feel obligated to do that. But this is an obligation now, right? This is an obligation to teach you a certain thought process, a certain ideology. And there's that topic is huge. You could go into that. But, man, at the same time, with the LGB community, right? The T's have to figure this out. They have to figure out that either they are being culturally led down the rabbit hole, right? They aren't like this. They just happen to be more effeminate men or more masculine women than the norm, right? But at the same time, how do you battle the left that just hones in on that victimhood mentality? That's so difficult.
We're never going to beat them at that. I think that, continuing to pretend like we're ever going to win over certain demographics that include, and I'm not going to include LGB folks in this, because if LGB people were a minority group, would be the most well off, because we don't typically have children, and if we do, it's much later in life. Back to the trans thing, I think that, I want a family. I want to be able to adopt children. And what I used to always tell people is, if this was a choice, why would you choose to ostracize yourself in society? Because even now, as we're in 2023, I'm not a victim, I'm not oppressed, but if I leave here and go to Walmart with my partner and we hold hands, I'm going to get looks and get things said. Not that I do that or would do that, but I'm saying it's not something I think you would willingly choose to do. And even if you do choose to do it, it's still the United States of America. We have the liberty and the freedom to do whatever we want, as long as we don't harm other people. Understanding there are consequences to doing what you want, both morally, religiously, ethically. But, I will also say that, going back onto the T, it's a very dangerous movement, and adding all the different letters is because here's why. Like, everybody that has a sexual deviance to them, meaning, they have autogynephilia, or they have gender dysphoria, which is a mental condition, by the way. All these things we're talking about that are not LGB, so, trans, non-binary, all those things are listed in the Diagnostic Social Manual, which is what clinicians use to treat mental illness. They're listed in there. Gender dysphoria is autogynephilia, which is when you're kind of, I hate to say it, aroused by being in women's clothes. Those are all in the clinician's guide of how they diagnose mental illness. So these are mental illnesses. There are treatments available for those things that don't always include, the mutilation or the hormone therapy. And I don't know if you know, the courts have put a hold on a lot of these these bills that we pass in different states that ban transitioning for minors, which I think is really unfortunate. And I hope that we can get them back and fix whatever's wrong with them constitutionally, because it is the human rights war of our time, is saving children from mutilating their bodies. Not only that, educating parents on what to look for. So one of the last podcasts I was on, I'm going to say it on yours, you need to know what's in your child's classroom. You need to know what every flag in that classroom means. You need to look that teacher up on Google. You need to do everything you can do to make sure you know where your child is going to school. And we also, at the same time, need to be advocating for school choice, because people that want to send their kids to parochial school, religious school, homeschool, community schools should have the right to do it. The money should follow the child. It's very, very common, and I don't know why it's taking us so long to do it. But, there are and should be choices for people, because, that's why Misha Maynard switched, parties, because she wants choice for children, because the school their children goes to is one of the lowest achieving schools in Georgia. And a zip code shouldn't determine where you end up in life. So I say all that to say, we're not gonna win the culture war on everything. I think what we've got to do a better job of as a party is being a big tent party, including everybody in the conversation, including everybody that wants to be included, and not compromising on the things that matter. Because you're not going to find a Republican that agrees on 10 out of 10, but if, Ronald Reagan's famous quote that I love, and I love to remind some of the more, far right folks in our party, his most famous quote was, an 80% friend is not 100% enemy. So if you're with the Republican Party on 80% of issues, which is going to be most LGB people, they're Republicans, and we can disagree on things. And I'm sure if you went down the list, you're going to find one or two things that you think, well, I don't know that we've got this 100% right. And so that's why we have the freedom to have primaries and elections and to pick who we want to represent us. But I do try to tell every parent there needs to really be like a book. I love Abigail Schreier's A Crisis of Our Girls. There's a lot of really good books out there that teach you what to look for and what to do if you think your child is experiencing these things. And don't send them to a gender affirming care psychologist. This is a new term. I don't go to the doctor to say, hey, I want this medicine. I go to a doctor to say I'm feeling this, chest pain, or I'm coughing. What can you do for me? Gender affirming care, just by the name and the movement, is saying, I feel this about my body. You need to give me the drug so that I can be the gender that I want. It's like they're telling the clinicians what they want before they go into the therapy or into the practice.
Skyler, we are way out of time.
I know. Yeah.
But that being said, this was an incredibly interesting conversation. I didn't mind kind of going out of time on this. This is going to be probably one of my longest podcasts. And the thing is, Skyler, I could keep going. The one thing that I want to do before we go, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us on this podcast, but I want to try something a little bit new. And I'm going to end this on a question that is just going to rile your feathers, but you're going to have to go to the comment section to talk about it. I'm going to encourage my viewers to go to the comment section to talk about this. The question I want to ask the viewers, and the question that I want to ask you now that we're done and you can't talk back and respond to it, right, is you talked about how the trans movement, the T, the plus, the 2, the A, whatever, community is listed as mentally disorder. Back in the 1950s, they used to say the same thing about gay people. Yeah, they used to say the same thing about gay people. So what is the difference, viewers? What is the difference? That's something that I want us to talk about. What is the difference between us saying, now that we moved on and say that gay people are more accepted in society? In the 1950s, we used to say that they were mentally disordered. Now we're saying these trans folks, individuals, are mentally disordered, right? They have some kind of dysphoria going on. Well, what's to say about 20 years from now, that it's going to be kind of the same thing. It's just going to be society. That's something to chew on. Skyler, I want to thank you so much for coming, man. Absolutely. I really do.
And I will go to the comments because I have a good answer for that.
Yes, dude, I can't wait. I encourage it. That's the reason why I asked it. So, Skyler, just in now that you're leaving, now that you're moving on, I have to ask, because I ask everybody, how do you like your ego on a cup there in front of you?
I love it. I can't wait to have a cup of good hot chocolate or coffee in it. I love it. It's so you. I mean, I don't think you could design a better one.
I love it. It was fun, dude. It was fun. I was like, this is just going to be fun. I want to give.
Put the name of your show on there or something.
Yeah,
That'd
man,
be the only critique, maybe.
When I do Mark II, I'll keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Well, Skyler, I want to thank you so much for coming, man. And
for having me. I appreciate you.
Cheers, buddy. What a good talk.